and welcome to this, the first of our series of Africa Calling. I am, as most of you know, Duncan Harris, and I'm President of the Australia-Africa Chamber of Commerce. In welcoming you, I'm wanting to advise, as we were just saying a moment ago, that this session will in fact be recorded and subsequently available in turn on both Austrade and AACC channels. This session will also include a Q&A, and to that end, I would ask that you submit questions through the chat function for our moderator to put to our speakers. The Africa Calling webinar series follows on from the highly successful Why Africa National Roadshow seminar series last September, which we, the Australia-Africa Chamber of Commerce, conducted in collaboration with Austrade, the Africa-based Trade Commissioners, Africa-based Heads of Mission for DFAT, and Export Finance Australia in Perth, Adelaide, Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. Its objective was to provide informed insights into the scope and opportunity for Australian companies seeking trade and investment in Africa. It was in fact a singular success in arousing real interest, and we were planning a follow-up program. The tragic events brought upon us by the pandemic this year caused us all to rethink how we would pursue such an objective and to remain relevant to those wanting to explore. The AACC, in pursuing this goal and its role as the peak body for such activity in Africa, now sees us joining with Austrade in a partnership to provide real contacts and connections across Africa to help organisations establish profitable, meaningful businesses. In the succeeding webinars, you'll hear directly from our various Africa-based partners who will allow you to look into countries by sector, by company, by director, by shareholders, by supply chains, and with risk assessments to give you the comfort you need in looking to engage with Africa. In parallel with this series is our development of a unique business intelligence platform in what we've called the Australia Business Intelligence Hub, BI Hub for short, to provide a first port of call for Australians wanting to enter or grow businesses in Africa. It will include regular reports such as country reports, economic overviews, country risk and industry reports, bilateral reports, potential partners in Africa, and news, both topical and relevant news on business, economic and political. This development will also tie in and integrate with the Austrade digital channels that are also currently being developed under the headings Find Export Markets and Export Market Profiles. Today, we will hear from three leaders of Australian companies and organisations who've already succeeded in Africa, in the hope it will inspire you to seek out opportunity in this rich and diverse continent. In making these introductory remarks, I'm pleased to be joined by Ian Halliday, who's the General Manager, Middle East and Africa and Turkey for Austrade, as well as our Dubai-based Consul General, who will also provide some thoughts on this development. I welcome you, Ian.
Oh, thanks very much, Duncan, and good afternoon or good morning, everyone. And it's a real pleasure to be able to present to you today and just say a few words. And certainly Kim and Martin and I have been really looking forward to this beginning of the webinar series. And Austrade is extremely pleased to be joining with Australia-Africa Chamber of Commerce in co-hosting what's titled the Africa Calling webinar series. It's going to be a series that will go over a few months and which will have a vast array of diverse speakers. And particularly with the COVID situation, this webinar series, we believe, will be an excellent opportunity to talk directly to Australian companies who may have an interest in seeking out trade and investment opportunities in Africa. It's also an important first step in our partnership with the AACC to achieve three important immediate goals. The first one being to promote the opportunities that are really abundant in Africa, leveraging by way of our rapidly developing social media platforms in both organisations, and by telling some wonderful success stories of businesses who are operating in Africa. Secondly, to connect clients and members through targeted and focused events, collaboration with presenters, and by way of our digital communication channels. And thirdly, to inform with excellent content on key African markets and opportunities. And I think we certainly understand that there's enormous potential across the entire African continent. So shortly you'll hear from Kim Fulgrove. Kim's our Senior Trade Commissioner in Africa, actually based in Joburg. He's going to provide us with an Africa update. But really the Austrade team is very much looking forward to working with the AACC and their African-based partners, who between them will provide the all-important commercial connections wanted to create a solid, long-standing business relationship. So really looking forward to the webinar today, looking forward to the webinar series and hearing more from successful organisations that have been already operating in Africa, but also we're very keen to hear from people who are interested in Africa and talk about opportunities on both trade and investment. So Duncan, thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words, and I'll hand back to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ian, and much appreciated. We're working already very cohesively and very cooperatively, and we really appreciate all that's happening. Kim Fulgrove is our Senior Trade Commissioner, as mentioned. He's based down there in Joburg, and I think, by the way, Kim, your lockdown is probably even more severe than ours in Melbourne. So thank you for being able to be with us today. Kim is a very seasoned international trade official who brings to the role great understandings of the opportunities that are so abundant in Africa, and therefore we're delighted that he'll be able to provide us with an Africa update. So thank you, and over to you, Kim.
Thanks very much, Duncan, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this this first Africa Calling series. And good afternoon or good morning to everyone, wherever you are, whether it's Australia or Africa or somewhere in between. As Duncan said, I'm going to give a very quick and broad update on what we're doing in Africa and some of the opportunities. So I'll cover just quickly some of the market drivers, the key sectors that Austrade's operating in, and just a couple of thoughts about doing business in Africa. I won't say too much about the COVID situation, other than, as Duncan said, most countries in Africa have been under some sort of COVID restrictions for about 140 days. I won't go through. Yes, Duncan, South Africa has got a slightly more rigorous regime than Australia. But one of the key things that's consistent across the African landscape is the challenges to the governments here that are looking to balance two things. One is minimising the public health impacts of the coronavirus, while at the same time trying to open up the economy. And many of the countries have not had really the opportunity to flatten the curve, as we'd say, at some stages before they open the economy up. And that's proving to be a really, really difficult situation. Now, but despite COVID, the fundamentals still remain. So some of the, the key drivers here are things like population. The World Bank's forecast of the sub-Saharan Africa population will rise from about 1.2 billion to around 2.5 billion in 2050. So, if you put that simply, today about 1 in 6 people in the world are African. By 2050, about 1 in 4 people will be African. So that's got a lot of implications for food supply, services, education, training, infrastructure, and it's one of the key things that I think many companies are looking at to determine what their market presence and market strategy will be. Others include like urbanisation and power generation. It's still hard to believe at times that just accessibility to power is a big challenge. There's something like 63 million people in sub-Saharan Africa that don't have access to power at the moment. Food supplies and food security. It's expected the demand for food in sub-Saharan Africa will double in the next 30 years. And, things like technology solutions are going to be really important to increase productivity. Digital finance is another one that I'll touch on a little bit later when we get into the sectors. But if I quickly go through, 5 main sectors that we tend to focus on here. First is mining and resources. This is sort of the big one right throughout Africa. Australia's got a big footprint, and we're a big player both in mining and mining supplies. We have about 165 mining companies across 39 countries. mining about 28 mineral products. At the moment, COVID is having an impact. Most of the mines are in full production, but many have got fairly strict WHS and COVID restrictions. So you can imagine in places like South Africa, where some of the underground gold mines are 4 kilometres underground, things like social distancing are really difficult concepts to, first of all, comprehend and then deliver on. Some of the main restrictions, though, relating to the movement of people or the restrictions there are, so fly in, fly out is very difficult because most countries have got, their borders are closed to international travel. Also mean things like site visits relating to, suppliers, managers, service providers, become more and more difficult, or if not impossible, when you've got to cross either international borders or, like in South Africa, even across provincial borders are very difficult. So just in the mining sector, where we focus on is really trying to help introduce Australian suppliers into the value chains of global and international miners. So that's the nexus we look at. We're looking to try to understand what are the main mining companies wanting to do as part of their future strategy, how does that flow down in their procurement programs, and how can we help introduce Australian mining suppliers, our equipment technology service companies, to those companies to best position themselves to be able to get future contracts. Second area that we look at is across agribusiness and food, and there's a lot of reasons that's driving demand here for increase, particularly premium food and beverages. The rising the middle class. There's large expat communities. There's increase in international brands and hotel chains. Pre-COVID, tourism is one of the biggest contributors to the economy across Africa. So these are all part of the equation that push towards a move towards particularly premium food and beverages. But really the import or the export from Australia and import into countries of food products is very difficult. Often there are high tariffs, non-tariff barriers. Some areas there's import bans. There's also strong competition from local countries. South Africa has got a world-class agricultural system, and it's very, very keenly it's very competitive on price. So it's very keenly delivered across the African landscape. Even countries like Kenya have got very strong areas in their agricultural industry. But I must point out one area that we're very pleased that we might have some success is the access of high-end Australian beef, particularly Wagyu beef, into countries like Kenya, and that's come after a long haul from the last few years. But it started with our Gourmet Australia and Africa program that was very successful, and we did it in conjunction with heads of missions and with our great Australian chef Chris Wade. Also, we see things like wine imports are starting to grow. Mauritius, Kenya, even in Nigeria, there's real evidence of increasing Australian wine penetration in the local market, and that also includes in South Africa as well. So there's a range of interesting companies that are niche players that we're working with across water management, areas like technology-based remote tag readers for livestock management. We also see lots of opportunities around things like hospitality training, around abattoir management, horticulture management, genetic and breeding, reproductive services. So it's more perhaps in the technologies associated with the production process in agriculture, perhaps than the end agriculture and horticultural product itself. Another very interesting and large area we focus on is education. What we really see here is, it's linked to that issue about population growth. I mean, just getting back to that, you know, Nigeria will go from 200 million forecasts of today to 400 million in 2050 in 30 years. You know, and that's going to be a young population where in the country where it needs education and skills development, and so the delivery of education in all aspects is going to be massively important. So for us, we see this perhaps as a very interesting diversification opportunity, particularly relating to, say, student recruitment back to Australia. And that's, I must admit, all very confused and held in abeyance a little bit at the moment with COVID. But certainly we see that also that, you know, in-market delivery, you know, so-called transnational education is going to be more and more important. And once again, we see that not everything has been bad. I mean, non-health-wise with COVID, you know, the introduction of, you know, just simple forums like these that are generated and delivered through Zoom or WebEx. This really the delivery of education curricula and programs through, you know, online service is something that we've seen there's been a massive take up very quickly across Africa in response to the COVID issues. Yeah. So I think in these, we see that local presence is going to be more and more important as we go through in the market countries in Africa. I just mentioned lastly about health and medical areas. This is a very interesting area. It's one in which the focus has been placed on the sector by the COVID situation, but it's one in which we've seen gradually more and more interest around things like digital health, and digital health and health services. So, you know, once again, we see there's a link back to the population growth, but also we see there's, you know, massively increased demand for solutions that are providing improved efficiency and support, you know, for effective provision of, you know, of government-related health services. So already there's more than a sprinkling of Australian companies that are starting to operate in the sub-Saharan African market. Cochlear, which we'll hear from David a little bit later, is one of our great Australian success stories. And we see already in Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, we're starting to see a presence. We've got other companies that are providing clinical coding solutions, molecular diagnostic solutions. Also in areas like in preventive care products, companies that are starting to manufacture and supply supplements are becoming more and more obvious across the African marketplace. So it's an area that makes a lot of sense, and it's great to see that there is a range of Australian companies right across that spectrum of health and medical activities that are already starting to be, and we've got a great pipeline of companies that we're dealing with in Australia across everything from infantry control systems to PPE equipment, the manufacturer of, you know, acrylic face masks, healthcare standards providers. So it's an area that I'd really encourage that those that are in the industry, please contact Austrade or AACC about the opportunities that are emerging in the markets. I'll just wrap up now with just some thoughts, some of the challenges. Nothing's very easy all the time in Africa. A couple of things that we see. First, there seems to be a number of outdated perceptions. It's always the case. Sometimes it's lack of information. Sometimes it's a difficulty in understanding the risk and the risk mitigation strategies. There's one thing that we certainly find: lack of business data and information. So Duncan, it's really great to see that that's one of the areas that the AACC is tackling. It is very difficult to get information. It's not just a matter of going on the internet like it might be with in some other economies. You really need to have a local presence and a specialised source of data and information. Business infrastructure is challenging. Financing, I know a lot of times that as soon as Australian companies leave Australia, they feel as though they're on their own from their finance supporters. But there's a number of finance solutions that are very specific to Africa, and we can certainly help companies that are looking for that. Lastly, there's the politics, bureaucracy, those sorts of things. So it's not an easy market to get in, but once you've done your homework, you find that generally your profit margins much more than you would expect. Duncan, I know everyone's pushed for time, so I'll sign off now, but thank you very much for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Kim. And of course, the word profitable should appeal to a lot of people which viewing in at this webinar this evening. So we now look to hear from the representatives of the three companies who've already established themselves in Africa, and in doing so, understand how they've achieved their success. And to this end, and you've made reference, of course, to Cochlear, I'd very much like to call on David Profeta. David is actually the Area Sales Manager, Sub-Saharan Africa for Cochlear, which is, of course, a great Australian success story with an increasing global reach. And David will now provide us with his approach to establishing the Cochlear business in Africa. And I welcome you, David.
Hi, welcome everyone. I hope you can see me by now. Thank you very much, Duncan. Thank you to the Australian Africa Chamber of Commerce to give us this opportunity to share a little bit our story, which we hope it's going to be a success. We don't know yet, but things look like they are going to be heading towards a success. So I'll be sharing my screen. You should be able to see it now, I hope. Can you all see my screen, or?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. So again, thank you very much. And just to start, so we have been working with the Australian Trade Commission, with the Australian Africa Chamber of Commerce for quite a while. Just recently in Kenya, we had a fantastic event where we got good support, a lot of support from the local team. Shout out to Brenda and Juliette on that. But just given that many of you might not be in this industry, so Cochlear is a manufacturer of implantable hearing solutions, global market leader as of today, and we are listed in the Australian Stock Exchange. Our mission is to make people hear and be heard. As you can see on the left side, the left-hand side, this is our Cochlear Nucleus system, our flagship product. That's what makes people hear. And this is how it looks like when a recipient is actually using our product. So our main target in Africa is for sure pediatrics. This is what we want to achieve, to give access to as many people as possible. And Duncan already introduced me, so please feel free to reach out if you have any questions after my presentation or after the Q&A even. I'm the area sales manager for Sub-Saharan Africa, and I work now for 10 years actually for the company in different role, and this one being the most recent. So, but let's have a look on how we started. I mean, I would have been very happy about the webinar and the forum like the Australian African Chamber of Commerce is creating now about 6-7 years ago, when we all got started and started to look at the African continent. Would have made some things easier, but I'm really happy that this is now being created actually, and that we can contribute to it. So if we look at the population in the main markets for Cochlear, and you can see them listed on the left-hand side. So Nigeria, of course, our key revenue driver, followed by Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and Namibia. When we were discussing what makes sense for Cochlear, where do we have to start? Because it has to be said, our business, mainly in the beginning, it's very much focused on the private market, so people have to buy it out of their pocket. So in that case, we have to also understand how strong are the economics of these countries, how strong is the buying power of our patients or our future customer. And this chart was created by the Gapminder Foundation. It's the author of Factfulness, which is a very interesting book, and they together created this foundation. It's a free app which shows you the development of population by size, which you can see here. So this is China. The small red one is Australia in comparison, and the biggest blue one here is Nigeria, followed by the other African countries. So you can see here how population develops and moves from the different incomes level. And the red line marks the extreme poverty line. So everybody on the left side of this line would be living in extreme poverty. Crossing this line, you go further to level 2, level 3 income, which is then low middle class, higher middle class, and of course on the level 4 is more or less, let's say, rich people. So we start in 1980. We can tell that the curve is moving. You can see it very much so in China, 2009, and where we are on the latest possible data, 2019. What is interesting for us, it's clear in Australia not much changed. It moved further to level 4, but interesting for us is Nigeria to see, and the other African countries, Kenya here. All of them, the majority of the people are living over the extreme poverty line, and even more importantly, the whole curve is moving towards level 3, which tells us, focusing on the private market, that actually the people, our future customer, have buying power to purchase one of our products. Of course, we aim to get government involvement, government budget, like we do it, like we have it in many other countries in our industry. But of course, until that time, we want to build up business, and it's a marathon for sure. So we have been in the market for over 6 years, and it's a long-term investment for us, for Cochlear, in this continent. So this is just to understand how we more or less try to pick the markets, because it's clear Africa is a continent of and sub-Saharan Africa of more of 41 countries, and there is no one-size-fit-all strategy. We had to learn that very quickly, actually. But you have to treat every country with their own strategy and own focus. That's why we said, okay, we have to pick our winning horses in this case. And of course, Nigeria was one of the first, Kenya as well. They started pretty much in the same time, followed by Tanzania and Uganda, also because of their proximity to each other. So this is all from Kenya, it's all 1 hour flight. And of course, Nigeria, the strongest economy by now in sub-Saharan Africa. And I guess this will stay like this. And in addition to that, of course, the biggest population. So this is how we had to pick and choose and decide which countries we want to be active. Because also Cochlear, we have not the capabilities, the resources to just go ahead and be active in all African countries. Also because our product requires a lifelong service model. So we have to be able to serve our patient for the rest of their lives. And now if we go further down in our kind of selection strategy, this is now the example of Nigeria. If we look at Nigeria also here, I mean, the country is huge, plus 200 million people living in this country. So it was very quickly clear to us that we cannot be everywhere in the country, but we have to focus on what are the most important and largest city. And of course, Lagos State with more than 22 million, with a population of more than 22 million, and Abuja. And Abuja maybe not by the size, even though 2.7 million is a rather big city in our case, but Abuja is the political center of the country, and this is where you want to be in case you are working on governments getting involved into this, what cochlear implantation and hearing preservation and all of what our industry brings with. So it was very quickly clear that Lagos is going to be a focus point for us. This is also where we do the most of our surgeries, where the biggest part of our sales come from. And then of course in Lagos we even have started to to cut it down into districts. And also Lagos was the very first big investment done by our company, where we opened the consultants office. We hired 3 consultants, a team lead and 2 consultants, all of them with the commercial background.
Hello.
Hello? Yes. So this is where our focus is in today, and where our biggest investments is in. So Nigeria and Kenya is what drives our business. And now to conclude, of course, the one thing we learned the most is, of course, that we have to strategize. As I said, every country needs a strategy. We have to focus and mainly execute. No strategy is worth anything without execution. And these are some learning we had over the past few years. Challenge the status quo. I guess that's what mentioned also by Kim before. You need to be flexible. You need to be able to adapt constantly, sometimes on a monthly basis. If it's easier, then it's more on an annual basis. So that's very important. It's not mentioned here, but resilience is a key. So if something doesn't work out, you continue, you do something else, and this might work out. And having people on the ground is, especially for us, was a key factor and helped us very much to grow further. I will not go much more into detail into the other boxes, but yeah, I believe these are the most important learnings for us. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, David. And there was a lot to consider there, and I'm sure it'll give rise to a lot of good questions. And now I'd like to call on Daryl Wurst. Now, Daryl is a very interesting gentleman. He's the founder and chairman of Fortel Systems. Fortel, of course, is based in Newcastle, New South Wales, and they're experts in digital rail solutions, where they've been very effective and very successful in Australia. And they've now recently created bridgeheads in East Africa, and in particular, Daryl's going to refer to a particular project he's working on right now in Kenya. I wonder if you take this on from now, please, Daryl.
Okay, thank you. Share. Okay, you see my screen?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Duncan, for the introduction. Thank you very much to Austrade for having us here. And I'll talk a little bit about what we do and how we got into Africa and what the issues were. So basically, we're a software engineering company. We started off as a hardware technology company, but these days we're exclusively software. We deal with the real-time business of transport, that is real-time tracking, performance monitoring, schedule monitoring, safety management, worksite management, anything that deals with software in those places. And our view, of course, is that the future productivity and safety of the transport industry will come through software, not more and more hardware. There's heaps of computers out there, and we need to exploit them to get the efficiencies and safety that we want. We have some 50 development staff in Australia, and we do all our software development in Australia. As you can see there, we're operating across Australia, Kenya, South Africa, and Mauritius, and we've got interests around the world in North America and South America. So to cut to the chase, what is our core offering for the African market that seems to be working? It is train control using satellite or radio control, so there's no infrastructure on the track. When we're finished our deployments, there's no coloured light signals, there's no power, there's no copper wire. It's all done via technology in the train, via the satellites or communications back into a train control centre. And our biggest project is in Australia as our reference project. You can see there in New South Wales, all those red lines are covered by our technology. And incidentally, some of the black lines are too, but not under this contract. So what I want you to draw out of that slide is that we operate over vast areas in remote regional places that are very applicable to Africa. So we want to take our technology that's proven in Australia and help the African countries, and also do some good business ourselves, of course. Another project that we work in is, another area we work in is light rail. This is an example of a light rail system we built the software for and equipped. This one's in Newcastle in Australia. And what I want you to get out of this slide is a lot of the software in that we develop is not unique to any one industry. What's unique to an industry is the slides that you will see down the bottom right on how you display data. but the underlying technology of tracking, performance monitoring, scheduling, all that sort of stuff can be reused. So a lot of our software is completely reusable, and that's a key feature for us. Another key product that we found a lot of success with, and there's a few examples in Africa, is our tracking product. We all know GPS tracking is ubiquitous. You have it on your phone, smartphones, tablets, all that sort of thing. But of course, that's not enough. Anyone can track something, but you've got to correlate it with the performance scheduling. How are you actually using the information to make better decisions? And we've been doing this for a long time, and we have very big reference projects in Australia that are equally applicable to any other country or nation. And the question I ask at this point is, where is Google? Where is Facebook? And of course, where is Fortel? It doesn't matter this day and age. The technology is ubiquitous. We make it happen wherever it needs to happen. It appears as an app or as an application on a client's computers or systems. So the COVID situation doesn't worry us. In fact, we've been doing extremely well through the whole COVID situation. In this particular slide at the bottom, I've put up 3 examples. There's the New South Wales Country Regional Network on the bottom left. The middle one there is the Newcastle Light Rail Operations and Control Centre for the light rail system. And the example on the right is North West Rail Link, which is a metro system using other companies' train control products, but we still do the tracking. So I'm going to get into this slide here where we'll spend most of our time and hopefully position for some questions. So the message I'm giving is that software is the key, and through software and technology on the platforms and in the control centres, we can solve many problems. And we avoid then the security issues, the theft issues that are rampant in many operating environments. Because our technology is developed in the remote regional markets of Australia, which is arid, as you know, you see it on the news, the bushfires, the deserts, the rains, the storms. Our technology is proven to work in the worst that the environment can offer us. Then the main product suites, as we said, we're looking at the poor security areas, if you like, or the remote regional areas where you can't get maintenance staff. We're looking to remove the sources of unreliability, operational inflexibility, and that, of course, is anything requiring power or wiring. We use any communication system, which is very interesting. You'll find many people say you have to have a safe communication system, and what I would say to that is no such thing as a safe communication system. It's how you use the software, it's how you use the data, it's how you make your decisions, it's how your system fails safe. Technology is just technology. It's the process that makes safety and efficiency. We've been doing what we do on many rail lines for many years, and that's how we've been actually found, which I'll talk to just generally. Basically, we operate with the rail regulatory approval. Australia has a quite rigorous regulatory environment we have to all work in, and of course that gives us then the credibility to work in the wider markets. We have successfully deployed one system in Africa and Kenya, pit to port client, and clearly we got potential to be others, to help others. Now, how this all happened was we were found by our website. So that's the first thing I'd like to put out there for those trying to enter the African market. We were found. We didn't enter Africa, then tried to sell our business. Then having got a number of hits in this particular client interest, we then went in country, and this is where Austrade was very important to us, because Austrade was able to give us credibility and advice on how to work in country, attended our meetings, and helped with some of the bureaucracy and the other security issues of working in Africa. So I can't overemphasize enough, a relationship with Austrade was very important to our penetration in the market. We did have difficulty trying to find clients or people to work for us. It's very hard to know who to use, as you would understand. And once again, by taking a steady approach and a few visits, we were able to get to a situation where we had a suitable representative in country, and that then enables you to start building up at that point. And of course, with the reference project comes the opportunities to grow into other areas. So to summarise all that, the pathway for us to Africa is to make sure you can be found, use the resources that are available to you at the government level, because as small to medium sized companies, you can't compete with the politics, the bureaucracy and that without help. And then get yourself in country, because you can't work there without being in country. And then take it from there. So today we have a representative office in Pretoria, Johannesburg area. We have Fortel Africa. We have a representative office in Kenya, Nairobi, for our work there. And of course, their role is to take our wider technology suite and help clients now that they understand that we are serious, we are in Africa, we can help. So that was our journey. And I'd like to then acknowledge it's time for you to put your questions through and hand back to Duncan. Thank you, Duncan.
Well, Daryl, thank you very much indeed. It's really appreciated of that good presentation. I'll just throw down that we are having a question time which follows. So just firstly, though, let's turn to our third speaker, Dr. David Dopel. David, of course, is a distinguished academic. He's got a current focus on the nexus between the extractive industries, the agricultural sector, and farming innovation in Africa. I'll throw to you, please, David.
Thank you very much. And it's a great privilege to be here with so many participants. And thanks both to your organisation, the Chamber of Commerce, and to Austrade for making it happen. These days, this is pretty much the only way we interact with each other is via digital things, and we're getting pretty adept at it. I have 4 Zoom meetings today, another 2 in Africa this evening. So, in fact, I'm travelling to Africa much more than I ever have. I just do it virtually. I'm going to share my screen now and just give some of the story of Murdoch University's engagement with the continent of Africa. And if I go share and view, slideshow, there we go. You mentioned earlier in the presentation about profitability. Of course, that is not a driver for a public university. We work on different metrics entirely. And we exist as a public good institution, and at Murdoch we're very proud of both our educational achievements for training students, and also for research, in particular what we call translational research. So research that makes a difference, research that makes an impact. And in fact, if we look at the field-weighted citation index, which is a measure that academics use to say how good is our research, one of the numbers we've been able to crank through within the university is that when we work with African partners and co-research and co-publish, the impact of that research is 3 times the average of what it is for the university in general. And so that means we're better together rather than better alone. And that certainly is our approach to the continent of Africa. So we don't work in Africa, we work with Africa. And there is effectively no engagement the university has on the continent that does not involve an African partner or more than one. And these are across many of the nations of Africa, in excess of probably 25, maybe close to 30. What I'd like to do in the few minutes that I've got this afternoon is to give something of the flavour of what we do, which also then tells the story of how we operate. And I would hope then for the viewers on the Zoom call, maybe some ideas for yourselves about points of intersection and opportunity for your own companies. And from Murdoch's perspective, we are always keen to work with industry in terms of the translation of our research, both nascent companies and mature companies on the continent and Australian partners that are there or would like to be there. In a couple of years ago, we began an effort at Murdoch University on a program called the Third Commission. This evolves from a number of engagements we've had over the last decade where we've looked at a region and looked at some major issues. And we chose for our Third Commission to focus on the continent of Africa. And this builds on a piece of work that we did probably in the last 8 years in partnership with the African Progress Panel, which was Kofi Annan's think tank set up after he finished up as Secretary General of the UN. And we were involved in a number of the reports that were developed by that august body, and felt that in approaching 2020, we could be of service in updating some of that activity and the things that were being looked at. In this 2-year piece of work, which we're now in, we've been exploring the demographic dividend in Africa that's been mentioned already in terms of the youthfulness of the continent. I'll say a word about that in a second. Looking at a healthy Africa, the blue economy, power and light, the extractives industry, and then some of what our conclusions and recommendations might be. We're also looking at all of these areas with the cross-cutting themes of youth and gender, climate change, and we've added this year a response to COVID-19. Obviously, that wasn't in our original setup in 2018, but it's been added this year. So as I said, we started a couple of years ago. The plan is to do a sneak peek of this this body of work and this report in November at Africa Down Under at Africa Week in Western Australia. So we've looked at the demographic dividend, and I think it's more than just saying Africa is a youthful continent. There are some really significant choices that are faced by many of the nations of Africa at the moment about what the future looks like in terms of the change in demographics over the coming decades, and whether countries will be young and poor, old and poor, or old and rich. And for the continent, it's really understanding what are the policy settings that may change sort of which category you might find yourself in as a country in 10, 20, 30 years' time. Of all of these, older and richer is the one that is to be preferred, and those that follow demographics and changes in that will be very familiar with the story of China. And in fact, one of the major authors of this section of the paper is a China watch and has written extensively there and has applied many of the same insights and understanding to looking at demographics. That will be published in November of this year, and I would urge you to take a look at that in particular. For a healthy Africa, we're looking at the connection between agriculture, food, and health. And so rather than focusing on what have been the traditional looks at communicable diseases or diseases associated with sanitary conditions or malnutrition, we're now focusing on the change in Africa from rural to urban and concerns around what's known as an obesogenic environment, what it means for someone to move from a rural diet to an urban one, the modification in the gut microbiome. Now, these sound like they're things that would be more of concern in a developed country, but all of the data is showing that these are major, major issues facing many of the countries in Africa. Tied to that then is what diet is all about. And then if you're in creating food, how you grow that, how you import it, and we would be aware of the deficit at the moment in the many billions of dollars in terms of food generated and food produced. We're working in a couple of very exciting areas, and I'll mention just one of those in a second about the change in some of those food metrics. And that's in the area of the blue economy, both of the small-scale coastal fisheries, so the nearshore fisheries, and then the issues around illegal and unreported catches, which are offshore, which are exploitation and theft. We've also been focusing in particular in Kenya and also in Ghana, looking at aquaculture opportunities. And Australia has a significant expertise in these domains, and there is massive opportunity for partnership and sharing of knowledge. To that end, I'd also say, though, that we're not just interested in knowledge from here to there, but the co-generation of knowledge, and some of the programs that are being rolled out in Kenya are of direct applicability here in Western Australia, and we're looking at setting up partnerships in the Pilbara and Kimberley regions with some projects in Kenya, so going the other way. Kim earlier mentioned about the electrical deficit on the continent. So I'm going to read this out. So business as usual for the rollout of regional and rural power means that there are people who are not yet born in Africa who will live their entire lives and not have reliable, consistent electricity and light. So business as usual can't be what happens going forward. And there is an enormous amount of research now looking at the leapfrog capacity on the continent to move to microgrid generation, low voltage DC power capacity, and how a whole new range of electrical devices can be built and deployed under that modality. Working at 50 volts direct current and under, of course, is a very safe system, doesn't require one to be an electrician, and you'd be amazed how much of what we really operate and use in this modern world that runs on just a few volts of DC, just about everything. So there's, I think, enormous opportunities in that space as well, and we're seeing that happening all over the continent. In the extractives area, while it was mentioned earlier, the number of Australian mining companies present and working on the continent, I think it is fair to say that the biggest employer of mining and perhaps the biggest economic multiplier in the extractive sector on the continent is in the artisanal sector, more than 11 to 12 million people nationwide. Now that's sometimes talked of as illegal mining or informal mining, but I do think that many of the countries on the continent are looking seriously right now both from a policy and a regulatory environment about how to formalise some of these sectors. And I think there's huge opportunity for Australia to be part of the growth of that industry via small to medium-sized enterprises and their role in the extraction and beneficiation of Africa's natural resources. I'd also say in post-mine life, there are some exemplars in the Australian mining sector in Africa that are leading the way there, and I'd single out Base Resources in Kwale in Kenya and Resolute in West Africa, doing great work and thinking around this. The last would be around e-waste and urban mining, and that's very much a fourth industrial revolution opportunity. And the Australian effort around advanced battery minerals, which is centred in Western Australia, has a large e-waste component to that, and some really exciting research that's happening there. And a lot being done at the University of Cape Town in that regard as well too. I think lastly, just to talk about the cross-cutting issues that we're involved in, because we're taking each of these as sectors, but we're looking at them in terms of gender and youth. And one of the most exciting things, and I can't stress this enough, there are more than 800 tech hubs across the continent. Amazing work being done in incubations, the youth of Africa, in tech, in blockchain, in all manner of entrepreneurial activity, and the chance for us all in Australia and elsewhere, people of goodwill, to partner and grow these businesses. I can't emphasize enough how significant that is for going forward. And of the two photos on the slides you've been seeing, the bottom one is our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Ava Lunonen, with a group of young African entrepreneurial women, all starting businesses in Southern Africa, who were part of Africa Week last week. And they were incredible in terms of the businesses they had started and what they were doing. And we had some great conversations with venture people here in Perth while they were here, and other partners about the growth of their business. So I guess as I finish and think about what we're wanting to to leave as a message is to say partnership is the way to succeed on the continent, to think about the value that can be created locally and how you can be a part of that and benefit indirectly as a result of it. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you, David. Can you? Yes, thank you indeed. Look, that was all three speakers have thrown up a lot of thoughts, I'm sure, and I know that there's been quite a number of questions that have come forward. At this point, I'd like you to actually give time to Martin Ferreira, who's of course our Trade Commissioner for West Africa.
Agreement is going to improve the level of trade in terms of logistics, in terms of customs management. So I guess that whoever would like to take this question on, over to the panel.
Let me see. It's Kim Fulgrave here. Perhaps if you can hear me, Martin, I'm happy to make a few comments.
Please, thank you.
First of all, look, I think in concept, it's really interesting and could be a very, oops, I'll get on there, really valuable initiative. If you look at the general trading profile of most African countries, they actually trade a lot more outside of Africa than intra-country trade in Africa. And for the, if you like, for the overall benefit of the, you know, the total African economy, I think many people are pointing to not so much low-hanging fruit, but really great prospects for the countries of Africa to actually conduct more trade with each other, not necessarily at the expense of with foreign countries, but with each other. And so I think any moves that could involve in, let's say, harmonisation of that trade across borders would be something that's going to provide a bigger market and therefore bigger opportunities for Australian companies, and certainly would place the emphasis, I think, on perhaps having more local representation within African economies than maybe is the case at the moment. The only thing I probably would say is just a cautionary note. Trying to get agreement amongst 50-odd countries in anything is difficult, and so I'm not really expecting that full border harmonisation will happen next month or even next year. But really, as a concept, I think it's brilliant, and it is. I know it's got there's a lot of support within African countries, particularly the major countries rather. And so I think that, look, if the certainly a lot of things have been put on hold because of the COVID situation, but I think once that can perhaps we overcome the biggest challenges with that, the idea of the Continental Free Trade Agreement in Africa is great and will offer really big opportunities for Australian companies.
All right, thank you very much, Kim. The second theme is about something that Daryl and David put emphasis on, which is in terms of the importance of local partnerships and market entry. So if I can ask either David or Daryl to comment on how difficult or what are the challenges you face in terms of identifying the local partner at the time, or else point out to some other hints as to how to go about selecting the right partner in market. Thank you.
Yeah, I can share our experience with Cochlear. So Africa is for us an indirect market, so we work with distributors in all countries, and of course your success depends very much from them. And in our case, it was difficult to find the right partner that has the same view like we have on a long-term business, not looking for a short gain, which it isn't with cochlear implants. It isn't at all. So we were very lucky in Kenya. We have a great company working with us for over 8 years by now. Same in Nigeria. Our distributor is with us for 10 years already. However, things started to develop more or less in the past 5-6 years, also because we were not investing into the market. So yeah, definitely very difficult. And if I'm not mistaken, I haven't found any registry for good companies in Africa. So it's very difficult to find a good company, and most of the time, it is out of connection. We just are now about to appoint a new partner in Uganda, and also this only happened because of our consultant in Uganda, Eddie, who through other connection got me in touch with this company. We met a couple of times in person. That's also very important. You need to meet the people, like Daryl mentioned. And now we're about to, what I believe, sign for a good partnership. So yeah, that's definitely a key to success. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Before we make a comment from an Austrian perspective, Daryl and David Deupel, any comments from you in terms of your experiences?
Yes, I'm just looking through the chat, and there's a note there about the Pan-African diaspora. And I didn't mention that that's probably one of our stronger partnerships. And this evening, in fact, I've got a Zoom call with the Perth chapter of the African Australian Young Professionals Association, and we have about 17 leading African Australians who are consulting with us at Murdoch, and I think that also is an enormous resource for any Australian company considering working on the continent.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Kim, would you like to comment a bit on the work Austrade does in terms of identification of partnership and how we work with clients? Are you there, Kim?
Sure.
Yep.
Martin, could you just say that again? The line just dropped out when you asked that. Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if you could please make a comment as to how Austrade work in terms of helping business to identify the local partners in the region. Is that coming through?
Well, yeah, if you can hear me now. One of the things that actually I'd just like David's comment. Hello, you okay?
Yeah.
Well, I just like David's comment there, didn't I? As far as he knows that there's not a list of good partners for Africa, or I would say for any continent, probably including in Australia. And it gets down to very much, I think, local knowledge and local content. And with the way Austrade operates with our what we call locally engaged, but our business development managers, part of our role really is to be, if you like, your extension of your company in market and on the ground, where we're able to, we have people that understand local culture, local business culture, what to look for, what not to look for. In potential local partners. And look, I've owned my own companies in the past and operated in different countries around the world, and I can tell you that from my experience, getting the right local partner is the most important thing you can do. I know some of the biggest Australian companies that have made the mistake and got the wrong local partner, and have had to bail out of projects, and it's cost a lot of money. So imagine how hard it is for smaller companies to find the right local partner. And if you do it, your life in Africa will be not a breeze, but it'll be very, very valuable and profitable. If you make that mistake and get that bit wrong, you're going to go back to square one at some stage.
All right, thank you very much. Duncan, conscious of the time, I'm just going to place a last question, and which is pretty much geared up for the chamber. So the question relates to accessing, local networks in Australia that either have an interest in Africa or businesses in Australia that already got a representation in Africa. So would you like to talk about a bit about the work the Chamber does in this context?
Well, thank you, Martin. And indeed, this will be borne out in the subsequent webinars that we're actually going to be running over the successive months, et cetera, as we bring forward other successful Australian companies and indeed the partners in Africa that we're working with to provide all the contacts and connections. Can I also say that I noticed in the chat, as it came through, a couple of really interesting and appropriate questions about what could we do for African companies that are looking to invest in Australia. It's very interesting you should say that, because in our earlier discussions with Austrade and this whole relationship, one of the things that we felt was important was establishing that very sort of corridor for those sorts of companies. So we at the AACC are actually working on, if you like, almost a role reversal of the very thing we're doing this evening here. And that is, of course, talking largely to Australian companies about opportunities in Africa, but we will also be paralleling that with opportunities for African companies. I was very interested in David's comment about the diaspora. That is something, David, we are particularly interested in joining with. In fact, only this week, we have joined as the mentoring group for the Blue Nile business program out of Melbourne University, which has got a whole lot of African Australians who are young business people who have established themselves here and are getting their foothold here. And we have taken it upon ourselves to provide a whole series of mentors for them to help them get to the next step. And indeed, in my presentation to them last night, I talked about the pathways for them, which of course can be for us in bringing forward quality African Australians and others who can help contribute to this great opportunity that in fact is Africa and Australia.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Duncan. There are 3-4 more questions, but what we will do is make sure that either the chamber or ourselves address those questions and get back to those individuals that made the inquiries. So I think that is over to you now.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Martin, and you're quite right. We do want to address all these various questions. I just want to say, however, this is the very first of our Africa Calling webinar programs. The next one, which is due on Wednesday the 26th, with the AAC and Austrade, we're going to actually be presenting one of our African partners. They're actually based out of London, called Asoko Insight. And they're the company that's developed leading corporate data platforms with Africa, with insights into the private corporates, the people who run them, and it enables the clients to use their data for targeted market analysis, discovery, due diligence, etc. The very sorts of things that we've been hearing about and the importance of it. And of course, leading to who is the local partner that has got the integrity and capability to help take your company forward. We're confident that this, along with a whole lot of other things we're going to be bringing forward, will help businesses who are looking to engage with Africa. And we look forward to the many of you who have joined us today. And can I tell you, this is recorded. We'll be putting it up on our website in the very near future. We'll be circulating it along with other materials. But we thank you very much for joining us today. And indeed, I'd like in particular, of course, to thank our speakers who've made the time for their presentations. It's been absolutely invaluable. Thank you, one and all.